There is fire on the mountain across Mali on terrorists. It is now blood for blood. Terrorists are begging United Nations for a safe corridor exit from Mali as Malian forces, Burkina Faso forces, Russian forces have already encircled them in Kidal, and Malian government have vowed that none of them will leave Mali alive. You all need to pay attention, guys. Listen to what is happening in Mali from the beginning to the end. Just make sure you watch this video from the beginning to the end. How everything started and how everything is going right now. Guys, you see Assimi Goïta, these people have been preparing. Just listen to this video.
Right now, as you are watching this video, armed rebel fighters inside the city of Kidal in northern Mali are sending messages to the United Nations. They are not sending victory dispatches. They are not announcing the next phase of the offensive. They are pleading. They are asking for a safe corridor out. They want the UN to negotiate their exit. They want an escape route. After the Malian military, backed by the Africa Corps, Burkina Faso, Niger forces, surrounded Kidal and intensified airstrikes and ground operations, turning Kidal to a death oven. And Bamako, Africa Corps, Burkina Faso and Niger, they looked at that request and they said no. Now, if you saw that headline and thought that is brutal, that is inhumane, that is a war crime waiting to happen, I understand that reaction. That is the reaction the international media wants you to have. But stay with me for the next 10 minutes. Because the story of how those fighters ended up trapped inside Kidal, begging for an exit, is not a story of Malian aggression. It is the story of a military operation so well designed, so methodically executed that the enemy walked straight into it and only realized the trap when the walls had already closed. This is not a story about a retreat. This is a story about a hunt. Let us go back to April 25th, 2026. JNIM, the Group for the Support of Islam and Muslims, along with the Tuareg-led FLA, launched the largest coordinated offensive this region has ever seen. 5 cities hit at the same time: Bamako, Gao, Savary, Sevary, and Kidal simultaneously. The scale was unprecedented. The message was unmistakable. We are everywhere and you cannot stop us. In Kidal specifically, the Malian Armed Forces and the Africa Corps, that is Russia's military contingent operating in Mali, came under heavy, sustained fire. And then, in full view of the world, they withdrew. Russia's Africa Corps confirmed the withdrawal publicly on April 27th. FLA commanders posted footage from inside the city. Fighters declared Kidal liberated. Social media erupted with celebration videos. International news organizations ran with the story. The Malian army retreated. The rebels took Kidal. The world called it a defeat. But here is what the world did not know, or chose not to ask. 2 weeks before that withdrawal, on April 13th, the Malian army had already conducted precision airstrikes on armed weapons caches and logistics nodes inside and around Kidal. They were not scrambling. They were setting conditions. They were preparing a container. Because the hardest problem the Malian military has faced for over a decade is not firepower, it is location. These fighters know the Saharan terrain better than any satellite. They disappear into desert, they appear, strike, and vanish. You cannot defeat an enemy you cannot find. So what do? You stop chasing them. You make them come to you. You give them a city, and then you close the doors. Searching for fighters dispersed across hundreds of kilometers of Sahelian desert is expensive, dangerous, and inconclusive. But when they are inside a city, with walls, with entry points, with predictable supply routes, the equation changes entirely. That is precisely what happened in Kidal. The retreat was not a defeat, it was an invitation. And JNIM and the FLA accepted it because they thought they had won. ACAPS, the Humanitarian Monitoring Organization, released a briefing describing Kidal's military situation in stark terms. Essentially surrounded, airstrikes operating from the east and the west, Malian ground forces pressing in from the south, and to the north, the Algerian border, which would normally serve as the natural exit route for fighters retreating deeper into the desert. That route is now politically closed. The diplomatic relationship between Bamako and Algiers collapsed after a drone incident, and Algeria is not in a position to facilitate passage without a serious political cost. Think about that geography for a moment. East strikes, west strikes, South, advancing ground forces. North, a border that will not open for you. The fighters who flooded into Kidal to celebrate a victory are now looking at those four walls and realizing they are not occupiers. They are contents. This is why they are appealing to the United Nations. Not from a position of strength, from a position of desperation. The request for a safe humanitarian corridor is not a political maneuver. It is a distress signal. And Bamako, backed by the Africa Corps, has decided it is not going to answer it. Now, I want to address the people who are uncomfortable with this refusal because the discomfort is legitimate. There are civilians inside Kidal. They are non-combatants. Humanitarian organizations have flagged this clearly. And any military operation that does not account for civilian protection risks becoming the very thing it is fighting. Something that creates more grievance, more recruitment, more insurgency down the road. That is a real concern and it should be on the table. But the specific question of a corridor for armed combatants is a different question. And to understand why Bamako is refusing it, you need to go to a city on the other side of the world 8 years ago.
In 2016, Syrian and Russian forces encircled the last major rebel holdout in Aleppo. After years of brutal urban warfare, a negotiated deal was reached. Armed fighters, including factions directly affiliated with Al-Qaeda, were loaded onto green buses and given safe passage to Idlib with international observers present. The deal was celebrated globally as a humanitarian breakthrough. The siege ended without a final assault. The world exhaled. Then, in December 2024, 8 years later, those same fighters reorganized, rearmed, and politically reconstituted under the banner of HTS, launched an 11-day offensive that swept through Syria and toppled Bashar al-Assad's government. 8 years, 11 days. That corridor that looked like peace had been a military reset button that the losing side used to come back and win the entire war.
That is the lesson that Bamako has internalized. A corridor is not mercy. A corridor is a second chance. And the Malian government's position is that they have given this particular enemy too many second chances already. As Malian sources have stated directly, we spent years chasing these fighters across hundreds of kilometers of desert. They finally came to us in one place, in their thousands, because they believed the retreat was real. We are not handing them a bus out of here. That is not cruelty. That is the Aleppo lesson applied on African soil by Africans without waiting for anyone's permission. Kidal is a city, but what is being decided in Kidal is much larger than one city. 3 countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, formed the Alliance of Sahel States, expelled French and UN forces, and told the international community, we will handle our own security. For 2 years, every Western analyst, every Brussels official, every ECOWAS communique said the same thing. This cannot hold. This will collapse. You need us. April 25th was the biggest test the AES has ever faced. 5 cities targeted simultaneously. The defense minister of Mali on live television. The world watching to see if this alliance was real or just a political performance.
The response was this. Within hours, Niger and Burkina Faso launched airstrikes inside Malian territory in support of their ally. A joint force of 15,000 was activated. This is the architecture that was built under sanctions, without Western backing, dismissed as illegitimate by the African Union and the European Union. And it responded in hours. The message from Kidal now is not just military, it is political. It is being heard in Ouagadougou, where Traoré is watching. It is being heard in Niamey, where Tiani has publicly named heads of state and accused them of sponsoring the attack. It is being heard in the coastal states, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Benin, Togo, where governments are asking each other quietly, how much longer can we afford to stand against the people who are actually fighting the jihadist front? Because ECOWAS parliamentarians have already said publicly what everyone knows privately. If JNIM is not defeated in the Sahel, it will reach the coast. Kidal is where that question is being answered.
I want to be honest with you, because this channel does not do cheerleading. The military operation in Kidal can succeed and still fail. That sounds contradictory. It is not. The communities of northern Mali have felt excluded from Bamako for decades. They have watched peace agreements made and broken since 2012. They have watched resources extracted from their region while services never arrived. Those communities are not just bystanders to this conflict. They are the soil in which the next generation of fighters is either planted or prevented. No siege, however precise, ever permanently closes a recruitment pipeline that is fed by genuine political grievance. So the question after Kidal is won, and the trajectory right now suggests it will be won, is not did we crush them? The question is, what do we build here that means we do not have to do this again in 10 years?
That question is not answered in Kidal. It is answered in Bamako, in governance decisions, in resource sharing frameworks, in whether the political settlement that has been deferred since the Algiers Accord of 2015 is finally seriously honored. The tree that has been cut many times remembers the axe. Mali has decided this time they will not return the axe. Good. Now they need to also plant something in the ground. The Tuareg rebels and JNIN fighters inside Kidal are stranded. Their plea to the United Nations has been met with silence from Bamako and the Africa Corps. The world is calling it ruthless. I am calling it strategic. And I am calling it a moment, a rare, genuinely significant moment when an African military alliance built from scratch under sanctions without permission from any external power executed a deception operation that drew its most dangerous enemy into a kill box of its own making. Whether they finish it matters. Whether they follow it with something durable matters even more. Drop in the comments. What does a political settlement for northern Mali actually look like? Who needs to be at the table? What has to be on it? The best responses shape the next video.